Nau mai I runga anō I te kaupapa nei. Tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. My name is Brian Morris. Ko au te pautikanga, a cultural lead for Tihei Takitimu, and so it is my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon, especially at this time and especially on this day of the week. So kia ora koutou katoa. There's some housekeeping that I need to go through. Not too long. I thought I would sing it, but then I don't think you're allowed to do that. But anyway, the restrooms are back out the doors that you entered through, past the top of the stair landing and down the corridor. Bathrooms are on the right-hand side of the corridor. In the event of an emergency, please follow the direction of the toi staff. One staff member over here. If an evacuation is required, an alarm will sound. Please leave immediately. Oh, there's a typo. Please leave immediately through the nearest exit. Sorry, I'm an editor as well. The exit is located out the side of the room and down the stairs. Interesting. Please make yourself familiar with the exits and those nearest. So we've got one here and we've got one over there. The muster points are located at the New World car park on Hastings Street, which is out the door and across the road. Do not re-enter the building until the all clear has been given by the toi front of house manager. And the last thing, there's going to be a small modest kai afterwards. So if you have any dietary requirements, please make yourselves known to the catering staff before consuming any food. Ka pai? Nā reira, aku rangatira, koutou katoa, tēnei anō te mihi kia tātou. Ko tai a tīnana mai, I runga anō I te kaupapa o Tihei Takitimu. Kia ora tātou, kia ora tātou. So, it's my pleasure to hand over to our co-chairs for a board update. Kia ora kōrua.
Kia ora koutou katoa ko waiau tuaki nei, ko maunga haruru, ko Takitimu te waka, ko Ngāti Kahanunu te iwi, ko Ngāti Tū te hapu, ko Tangoio te marae, ko Kerinuku tōka wingoa. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here today. It is more than we expected our one guest, so we consider this a full house. Look, this is our inaugural AGM, and we are truly delighted to have this opportunity to front our whānau. This evening, our intent is to shed some light on the decisions that we've made during our work, and that goes from April 1, 2023 to the 31st of March. So to say that this IMPB journey has been easy, it would be untrue. For those of you that know, when the IMPBs were set up, they're quite different to what has happened right now. But that's politics, right? So tonight we want to share with you our journey. We're going to provide a board update, an annual report, our financials, and what we do ask is that you hold the questions, take some notes and hold the questions till the end, if that's okay. So, for the purposes of recapturing the moment, I want to go back and talk about the purpose and the functions of the IMPBs, or Iwi Māori Partnership Boards. So we thought we'd start here pretty much with the purpose and the functions. Now, as I wanted to highlight, we are not immune to the politics that are currently at play. And you'll see politics at play every single day, especially in the health sector. So importantly tonight, we're sharing our progress in the context of transformation, because that is what the IMPBs we set out to do, is to transform a system. And for those of you that have followed, the Pai Order Act 2000 was born out of the Y2575 claim, where the Waitangi Tribunal identified significant breaches against their commitment to Te Tiriti. So it's important that when the IMPBs were stood up, they were stood up to transform Māori health, to create better monitoring and systems for our whānau. So the purpose of the IMPBs, clearly set out in the Pai Order Act 2022, said first of all, they are the needs and aspirations of Māori in relation to hauora Māori outcomes. Remember, the health system really just looked at outcomes based on a Western model of disease management. The hauora aspect of this is really critical for us. The next part was that the health sector, that we would monitor how the health sector is performing in relation to these needs and aspirations. And finally, the design and delivery of services and public health interventions. Now, during the reporting period, the functions of the IMPB were clearly outlined in the Pai Order Act, and it said that the functions are, first of all, to collect whānau voice, to complete a needs analysis, and from that, establish some priority settings. So this was about monitoring, influencing, investment, and innovation. And in March this year, the signals from the Minister indicated that the changes were at play. So, as I said at the beginning, to say that this has been easy would be untruthful. The goals shifted during the setup. So the Minister signalled that we would have the ability to commission, that monitoring would be a priority, and that locality planning was paused, and that legislative changes were made. So in spite of the changes that were loosely signalled, we maintained our line in the context of transformation. So I just want to be clear. Whatever the Minister had set in play, we had always said that Tihei Takitimu must transform the services that are currently being delivered to our people, otherwise we will be delivering the same services and getting the same bad outcomes. So our context has been clear since the outset, despite the ambiguity. And we recognise that transformation of this nature needs a clear roadmap. And today we're sharing with you our progress from phase 2. In phase 2, we've labelled it Explore. However, for context, let's walk through all of these phases of the transformation. So first of all, the establishment phase was a really interesting phase. In the first year, we turned our attention to building a start-up, growing board cohesion, setting an agile agenda, establishing a project officer, and ticking the right boxes along the way. We were recognised in legislation and became recipients of the capacity, capability and support agreement, with funding set out and listening to the voices of our whānau. So many, I guess, would say that IMPBs did nothing for a significant period of time. And outwardly, that would be true, because what we had to do is establish our own entity, register it before any funding could be transferred. And in accordance to this, we had to also make sure we were in alignment, and this is where the tick box exercise became. We had to make sure we were in alignment with what the ministry, the ministers, and when they were ready to receive our documents in their entirety. So that phase, that establishment, that growing cohesion, that agility, was quite a frustrating period of time for many of our board. Once we established that, then we were able to get money in the bank. So with money in the bank, we commissioned guidance on how to best engage with whānau and approved a 2-stage program for whānau collaboration and empowerment. The first stage invited whānau to share their status, their concerns, access to priorities regarding health. We shared whānau stories widely, informal presentations across the social medias. We commissioned more research to undertake a needs analysis for whānau and services in order to determine what matters are important and what we should be monitoring. So the whānau voice was significant for us, contracted this out, and really importantly, as you'll hear later on in the presentation, Heather will go over how we collect that whānau voice. So this phase we're right up to now, and we refer to this phase as the power up phase. And for those of you who I'm sure follow Minister Reti regularly, he talks a lot about power up. Not power aid, power up. Now, this year will be the year that we grow groundswell, we build capability, and we assert our influence. With a new legislated function of strategic commissioning to define, we will continue to engage, to take a deep dive on priorities with whānau, monitor the health system, and be in a position to influence investment in innovation. Looking forward, and what 2025-26 will bring remains blurry. As we said earlier, the goalposts change quite regularly. Without making our predictions about whether funding will continue, whether IMPBs will exist into the future, we'll turn our attention to reimagining a sustainable future, enabling a future where whānau are empowered to revolutionise hauora. In the meantime, let's take a look at our progress over the reporting period and share what we've done about our function, whānau voice, needs analysis, and priority setting, monitoring and influencing investment and innovation. I'd like to introduce Heather Skipworth to talk about the whānau voice.
Kia ora tātou. I must be the new co-chair. No. It's really good to see everybody here. He uri tēnei no te pakipakitango hene te mua, kaitahu, Ngāti Rangitihi, tūwhare tō me Ngāti Ruanui. Kia ora. So, I get all the cool stuff. We did a bit of whānau voice engagement. In spite of the political turmoil, there's no turmoil, is there? And the ambiguity and the confusion that Kerry and Lewis speak of, well, Kerry, whānau voice is our number one priority. And as Kerry alluded to a number of times, it wasn't just about collecting the quantitative whānau voice, it was about the qualitative stuff. And that's where I think a lot of our mihi will be spent is on the stories more so than the numbers, because the stories will end up telling what the numbers are. What matters to us as a board is that we listen and we properly listen, because we've all been to places where we say, oh, we're here to listen to you, and then our stories are often misinterpreted. And and that we listen to the authentic stories of whānau, hapu and iwi. So as Kerry said, we commissioned some research. The model that you can see presented is the model endorsed as the board. And I don't like to do death by PowerPoint and read it slide, word for word, so kia koutou. What you see in the picture is our explicit intent to collaborate and empower whānau. So throughout the summer period, 23-24, Henry and I took to the beaches, and it was Splash Planet, and we and a number of our board members and our team, and we went out to engage. We were at the Kahungunu AGM at Splash Planet. We went to Waitangi Day, which was huge. We had a huge number. Sometimes walked the streets of the parade and a number of other events. And what was really good about going to those events was people actually came up and asked, what's Tihei Takitimu? Because in Kahungunu at the moment, there's Tihei this and Tihei that and Tihei. So they were trying to figure out whether it was the same of what they already knew or if it was something different. So obviously it was the same but different. So when we handed the survey, so often our whānau are easily lured when you give them something. We just had Macintosh lollies, but the amount of people that come up and said, can I have one of those? I said, well, you need to sit down and we have a kōrero. And we sat with them. We didn't just say, here, scan the app. So we had it where they could scan it, or whether they could, if they wanted to fill it out in person. And we sat with them and talked them through it. And a lot of times one question was a story, like a real long story. So it gave us an opportunity to engage with our whānau, but also have them feel like somebody cares, because it wasn't just a tick box exercise. There was a lot of narrative in it. Okay, next slide. We asked whānau about the status of their health, and funnily enough, at some of the events we were at, there were other hauora providers that were doing surveys as well. So maybe we can collaborate a little bit better in that, so we're not like driving up the same driveway but with a paper sort of thing. So we asked about their health status and their concerns and how they access health services and what their priorities were. So the good thing about going to Splash Planet was there's always a bus from Wairarapa, Dannevirke and Te Wairoa. So we got a range of stories, some not too dissimilar, but they really enjoyed being heard. And some of them that we gave the app to, we thought, they're probably not going to fill it out, when we walk away, because that's me. When you walk away, you go, no, I'll fill it out. But we had a high percentage rate once we left actually continue with that app and fill the survey out. So this is what they told us. We had 750 responses. We also did a bit on our social media page, so we're getting a bit of traction there, and our reach on our social media page after we did some intros of the board members, it kind of grew a little bit more than we expected. So our Facebook page is pretty active, with people asking questions about who, what and why we do what we do. At the same time, we recognise that whānau are tired of being surveyed. And we continue to be mindful that whatever is shared with us is reflected back in all the right ways. So this is what whānau told us. So you can have a look. How's your hauora going? Sometimes I think when we ask people, we've got an automatic response of, like when you say, hi, how are you? Good. And then you go home and life's shit, So sometimes it is good to let them be and fill them out, because you might get a better answer. Mental health and well-being was a big one, and that's not unusual because we're in a flood-struck region, but I don't think it's just caused by the flood. It was there prior to the flood, and apparently all those worries got washed away with the flood in regards to the current coalition government. On the current health status, yeah, those are their biggest top 5 priorities. Mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, diabetes, heart disease, and access to dental care, especially a lot of the whānau in Te Wairoa. Next slide, please. So on access to healthcare and access to priorities, and it doesn't stop there, whānau were really specific about what they wanted. And also when we engaged with them, how easy it was for them to give up because they're tired and they're sick of not being served a lot of the time, or being told one thing and offered a different service that wasn't relevant to what they had asked for. Next slide, please. Am I going too fast? Are we good? Ka pai. So these are some of the stories they shared. Mental health and wellbeing is huge, especially in this rohe and especially after the cyclone. We lose so many to suicide that could have been prevented, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that's really, really concerning. Next slide. Again, it's the oral health. And next slide, please. And this one, breast cancer. We've got the highest rates, Māori women, sadly. So whānau, it's our whānau that guide our solutions. So next up, I'd like to introduce another wahine from Te Pakipakitanga Wahine Te Moa, Beverly Tahuia.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Beverly Tahui ahau, no Pakipaki ahau, and lovely to be here with you. And I just want to share, I'm a bit broke because I did have a bet on if there was more than 20 people that turned up tonight, I'd shout coffee. So thank you for coming. I'd just like to thank Heather for sharing the whānau insights, because for us as a trust, that was our number one thing to do, was to, and by far the number one thing to do, was to go out and ask our whānau what health looks like and wellness looks like and how it matters to you. And for me, whilst this is a moving feast, or sands of foundation or foundation of sands underneath us, if that's all we did or do, I think we've captured something that's a taonga that we can use for now and in the future. Something that was brought to my attention today, what we didn't do 30 years ago to set ourselves as a baseline. So that was that whānau voice. Thank you, Jodie, because she let it out with some of our trust's members. It's a taonga. I just want to also say that when we set out to capture this whānau voice, we were in the setup phase. We had no knowledge of what was to come. And so what we set up, we thought we were doing forever, because we knew that was important. So we continued on, and I'm going to move to phase 2 of what we've just only today completed. So we took our whānau voices and we commissioned a piece of work that from Mara Andrews that looked at, I guess, the state of the nation, that looked at our health statistics, our health data from everywhere, according to
Takitimu, according to us. And we laid it over and with what our whānau said. We were introduced to that document today, and it's a huge document, and it's a wonderful document, and it just really showed, but it's also a sad document, because what it shows is that we are right in what we're seeing is happening to our whānau, that when we walk the streets and we see our whānau limping down the streets because they didn't pick up their gout medication, or so-and-so, they're not accessing good health care, that there are huge barriers out there, and unfortunately, we of course are leading the way. So at least we're winning in something, but I wish it wasn't this. So that piece of work has just been completed, and it does mirror what our whānau say, bar one thing. Our whānau keep telling us we're good, we're well, we're awesome. And at the bottom of that, they're going home and suffering. They're not seeing their doctors early enough, and they're not getting their medication, and they're not doing lots of other things, and they turn up to A&E. And that's what the stats prove. So whilst our whānau voice says we are doing good because we live on our whenua, or we are doing good because we got food on the table and we're doing good compared to others, actually it's not reflected in our health statistics. And so this report is an important piece of work. It's what our IMPBs have been doing in every one of their regions, because that mainly is our responsibility to capture the state of health so that we can now monitor it. So, what did we learn? We learned that, I don't know how to move that. Nope, go back. Yep. We learned that we are growing as a population, that we have 52,000 Māori and represent 29% of the Māori of the total population here in Kahungunu, and that we will be, in another 20 years, 69,000 or 35% of the population, and that our investment into health or kaupapa Māori health needs to increase to match that population increase. But not only that, it needs to increase to equal what we can achieve through equity. So that's what we've learned today. So I'd like to introduce to you Darren Russell, who's going to talk to us about our next plan. Kia ora.
There's a fundamental difference between Daryl and Darren. Just for future reference, if anyone ever knows a Darren, it's very frustrating being called Daryl. Anyone who's Daryl in the audience, I still love you, but that is not me. Thank you, Brian. Ngā mihi o te ahia kia koutou katoa i ngā taonga ki kone o te rohi nei, e o koutou manaki mai te whai oro o ngā whānau whānui, a te tuakana ngā rangatira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Friday afternoon, close to 5 p.m. I just want to say thank you for coming to the Hui a Tau, mō mātou. And part of that rationale, as I could probably assume, is for the passion of the people and the well-being of the people. But I just want to say thank you. I have a quick couple of slides in and around monitoring. I think I'm going the wrong way though, am I? Nope, I am going the wrong way. Bev, you didn't push any of your buttons. I think as previously highlighted, the iwi Māori partnership boards in the original framing had quite clear responsibilities for monitoring. And as seen on the screen, there's an element where provisioning and the Crown saw IMPB in the middle, endeavouring to try and influence and ultimately change outcomes that we see in our community. Part of that monitoring regulation, and I think it was partly covered earlier,
talks about the information we gather from Health New Zealand, about the information we receive about local care through primary access locally and whānau voice. And Beverly just covered, to some degree, part of the picture of what we have been doing in order to make an informed decision. Ultimately, how we slice and dice data is absolutely critical for monitoring. And I think it's fair to say that our board had a concern that the monitoring has been a very good role for the Ministry of Health for the last century in paralysis by analysis, and absolutely very limited response to what is year after year extraordinarily inequitable outcomes for Māori. We do not bloody well want to be that. And ultimately, while we needed to build a picture, we have today finished, I guess, understanding partly the picture as fully as we can from within the existing system, merged alongside that of whānau voice, and to some degree came up with a framework that actually helps to distill the data into what decisions do we want to make on behalf of whānau, not as bureaucrats on a board. And partly the challenges we have within the existing system is the Ministry of Health is exceptionally dysfunctional, non-efficient, and very selective in how and what it provides to us in what I would argue is meaningful data. It might aggregate it, but it might not prioritise it, localise it, and or give us measurement over time. I think it's fair to say today within our tool, we made some decisions around using what has been presented previously alongside a framework that actually gives us the opportunity to be clear on A, how the ministry and or system should reallocate its resources, where perhaps we would push for and redesign policy, provisioning what is working and what is not, and that is going to be a challenge, but I would argue that is a fundamental core. With what pūtea we have, what do we decide to do with it? And ultimately, advocacy across all of those domains. There is a challenge in the breadth, depth, and scale of inequity across the system. And an IMPB of 5 members with what is an ever-changing landscape is always going to be somewhat limited. I think today we came to some agreement of principle around monitoring that actually fundamentally whether the system likes, dislikes, changes its name and or has regulation that relates to IMPB, the rationale of how we collect data to influence outcomes must be critical. If we cannot measure over time where we are and what the desired outcome looks like, then what is the point of monitoring at all? They are the key critical factors that I think I had on my slides. None of the text. Apology, Gina, for reading any of the things that you told me. If you just sort of probably sum up part of the monitoring things, shorter access to absolutely everything, shorter wait times to any specialists, and ultimately waiting times for treatment is almost non-existent. And everyone goes, yeah, we knew that. I think where we stand now is we've got baselines by which we can measure change. And ultimately, that's the part to front the crown with. We thank you for those that shared the data and ultimately are involved in the same game we are, which is about turning the Titanic around. I'm not interested in shifting from stowage to first class to end up at the same outcome. And that is part of our role. Innovation has to be pretty critical, and I'll introduce to you Henry Hickey. We were petite enough to eat.
Mea tuatai e tuku mihi ki te pāwhaka wairua, a matua Brian hei whakatuwhere tēnei pō. ai mea na hoki kia koe, e te kingi tū hei tea moi mai rā, mai rā, rire, hau pai mariri. Firstly, o he nāri heke tōku ngā, he uri o te waka o Tainui, ko taupiri te maunga ko Waikato te awa he piko o he taniwha, a he piko o he taniwha. Henry Heke, I'm one of the mātāwaka representatives on here, and along with my colleague there, Gerald, we also the mātāwaka. But here or no, this is an AGM, and as I'm not a Minister of Government, thank you. I'd like to thank our staff behind the scenes, ka pai ki muri, ka pai ki mua, but I'll try and stay on task in regards to the script that we have. But I just want to mention also Jodie and her team for all the mahi that you've done in regards to some of the research and the findings and the data that we have here today. But I get the exciting part, so I'm the innovative person in the sense of influencing investments and innovation. And as you can see here, the Minister on our screen here, there are currently 2 ways in which funding and influencing funding commissioning has been done. However, during our exploratory period and the phase in which we were challenged by this function, we had kind of no line of sight on the horizon, and we didn't really have an understanding, we as Tihei Takitimu, of the service and the provisions that are provided in Tihei Takitimu. So obviously with the change of government as well and the coalition that came upon us, Minister Reti signalled his intentions that IMPBs will affect the new function that's called not influencing investment and innovation, but strategic commissioning. So this function appears to be in the fold now, and we're referred to this strategic commissioning. So what does that actually mean? The Minister has asked us to complete these community health plans in draft form by the end of next month. Typical, the last time we were asked to look at a paper, I think we had 3 weeks, and we had to look at 500 applications. So a month is pretty good from the last time. This determines whether or not we are deemed as ready to join the first tranche of strategic commissioners. Community health plans are not traditionally health plan, it's not a traditional health plan, but the operational plan that allows the Crown to assess our readiness, Tihei Takitimu, our capability and our capacity to proceed to the next step. Think about that. It is not unlike, in this sense, the Hunger Games. So as we circle back to the functions of influencing and investment and innovation, there was no opportunity for us to do any of that work in the reporting period given to effect any such function. How we made use of the funding, though, as indicated by Kerry at the start, for the Crown, or the funding from the Crown, next I'm actually going to call upon Adriana Merton from Adept Accounting, and we'll go through those finances. Nā reira, e mea ana hoki kia tātou. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Henry, for the introduction. So I'm pleased to report and present the Tihei Takitimu Limited's inaugural financial statements for the year ended 31 March 2024. I'll be available to answer any questions at the conclusion of my presentation alongside everyone else, so not long to go. The entity was officially established and operating from 1 April 2023, and so therefore within this period have captured all the establishment costs in this financial year across the 12-month period. The establishment costs have included company incorporation, board framework set up, financial processes embedded, and various infrastructure requirements to ensure that entity was ready to move into their delivery, as particularly Kerry explained at the beginning. So this way. For the 12-month period, in a snapshot, the company reported a taxable profit of $5,917, which is essentially the interest we generated, as I'll go through. At an operational level, the key points to note for the period are, it was a break-even result for the year due to very purposeful spending. We were focused on engaging with relevant expertise specific to their requirements rather than investment in long-term employees or office and vehicle leases. The entity operated well within their board-approved budget, which clearly showed an intent of the board to be strategic in their approach as they deal with the changing landscape of the New Zealand healthcare system. They also showed an ability to tighten the ropes as required with the changes from government, and this ensured the delivery was in line with their outcome set. So the operational structure of the company aligns to page 14 of your annual report within your document, and this is very clearly displayed in the engagement and capability expenses on page 19 within the financial statements, which is also on the top slide. So if I'll just note the key expenditures made by the entity are board fees. Now these are set by government. Tihei Takitimu obviously has 6 directors and they're paid based on attendance. Staff expenses, there was an attempt to recruit a general manager. All other expenses are to be expected, specifically insurance cover, meeting and travel costs, and accounting and legal fees. So if I bring you to the balance sheet of the entity, this represents the overall cash and equity position as at 31 March 2024. There's a significant amount of funds not yet spent from contract income. Now these have been allocated to term deposits for future use, hence the strong availability of cash, yet low equity. So at an investment level, the key points to note for the period are, there is a focus on a long-term model and determining what this looks like. And for this reason, obviously there were funds made available at the beginning on sign-on from Te Aka Whai Ora, which have been set aside by the board for investment in the future. These have been treated as income in advance, which is on page 21 of your annual report, which totaled 2.2 million. All funds treated as income in advance have been placed on several term deposits as per the board's investment strategy. Returns to date obviously have been strong, with strong investor return rates being seen. The board are being prudent, patient and strategic with these funds while they determine their future viable product and in turn where funds will be allocated to, as they've explained this evening. Other items to note on the balance sheet are there's been a nominal amount spent on IT infrastructure to conduct the work to date, and all tax remains current. Just a couple of extra notes to make that this entity is currently seeking charitable status, of which the application has been submitted and awaiting outcome. And we propose to align our balance date from 31 March to 30 June to align with other iwi and central government. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Lewis, Kerry and the wider board, and Gina and the operational team for the opportunity to engage with you and to be the accounting firm for Tihei Takitimu Limited. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you from inception and to follow your vision for this entity, so thank you. I believe that success isn't about the money you make, it's about the difference you make in other people's lives, and Tihei Takitimu is well on its way.
Stimulating from an accountant. So we're all going into our AGM season as different entities. So I just wanted to mihi to everyone for coming along today. I know most of the people in here, but ko wai au ko lua sarata puahau, ko ai tētahi hoa tia mana a Kerry, no te wairoa hau, rongo mai wahine Ngāti Kahungunu ki te wairua, Ngāti Ruapani ki Waikare Moana. So again, as you can tell from our presentation, we've spent a lot of time trying to understand the changes in the health system, and they've been huge. You know, the first Pai Ora Act implementation, the establishment of the Māori Health Authority, waiting to see what the signals were from them around the function, so establishing the legislative function, trying to understand the guidance from them around how the operating model might work. All of a sudden, the new government comes in, there's another huge changes. So I think what you've seen today is just some consistency. We're going back to the core Pai Ora Act, which didn't change in the last amendment, which is really about whānau voice and stuff like that. And so that's where we've been at. We've had a lot of hui, but as Dame Eri Tana Tāwhiwhirangi once said to me, you got to have a hui to know what to do, boy. So, and where we're heading to now is really just working on that. What is the operating model taking us forward that can deliver on the functions? Because, you know, we are an advocacy governance body. We don't want to provide services. We don't want to cost a lot of money to the system when there's not enough money rolling around in the system. But we want to do the best job we can to hold the system account to deliver equitable outcomes for our whānau. We also want to hold the system to account and to invest in those things that our whānau see as important to their well-being. That may be outside health. That might be housing. That might be living on their whenua. And what the Pai Ora Act allows us to do as one of our functions is to work across sectors. So that's where we are. I've been fortunate enough to be, I don't know if it's fortunate enough, but I was part of the establishment. I led the establishment of the IMPB, along with the other treaty settlement entities, the Tai Whenua and a few of the Hauora Māori providers. So we established the IMPB model that you see today. One of the major debates, I guess, as we went along was whether we had a representational board, which meant that everyone had to elect a member from the entity to go onto a board. That was quite a debate between representation. I wouldn't say we got agreement, but we got a consensus. And the consensus was we wanted to appoint a board, have an organisation that had the capabilities, get the job done to hold the system to account. And that wasn't because the well-being of our people is more important than the iwi politics that sometimes comes into play. We all had a consensus, that's what we'd do. And so we carried on to appoint this board. We've had 2 board members leave so far. And so we've taken our time to sort of say, okay, when do we go back out to recruit? What does that mean, particularly as we establish an operating model that also is part of how we engage whānau voice across our rohe. And it is a huge rohe from Nuhaka right down to Porangahau. So that's probably a summary of where we're at in terms of the speakers and what we've had to say. But I guess now it's just time for answer any questions from the floor from people. Kapai, right? No. Yeah. Yes. I don't know whether I'll put that motion on the table, but no, okay. Don't.
Tēnā tātou, e hui mai nei, ke te tautu whanau nā mihi ko mihi. Ko nā rai haine tōku ingoa. For those of you who know, I live locally, of course, in Bridge Park. If you know where Paki Paki is, Paki Paki is a suburb of Bridge Park. I think throw an at me. By way of introduction, I was very fortunate to be on the panel to have selected this group to represent us today. And I just want to do a couple of things, if I may. I wanted to say this. The work you're doing is sterling work. It's fantastic work. I've kept an eye on it, obviously, as we progress through the year. And I want to congratulate you wholeheartedly on the effort that you put in. When we looked at your CVs, they were never in question. Never. The bits that went in the CV was the bits that said how hard-headed you are, how strong you are, how perseverance is your middle name. And I remember Daryl, Darren, David, whatever pseudonym you want to go by. I just want to say, I remember you in the interview talking that you openly stated you're an agitator. Keep agitating, my friend. Don't stop. All of you catch this disease. Because you know, it's not about the percentages of the population, it's about us. Because they can just fly 2 more plane loads of people in, boom, our percentage goes down. Keep fighting for our rights under Te Tiriti. This is a Te Tiriti the mechanism, or the half the mechanisms that's left, because mihi half kia whatuora, marae to a te aka whaiora. So only half the mihi to whatuora, because you lost your other leg, our leg. So I wanted to mihi to your first AGM and to let you know, very proud of your work. In terms of the strategic commissioning going forward, one of the things that I'd like to see is all the primary care services coming back out to the community, delivered in the community. These are our people. They want to see our faces. You know, there's no reason why they should be locked up in there. No reason at all. We've got established networks out here. We know this. Our marae, our everything. We've got established networks. I would encourage you to take this kaupapa forward in your next term. You've got a beautiful platform already set. We've seen that. Beautiful platform. It's agitation time. We don't got long. I'm looking at my Pākehā mates, you know, we went to school together. I'm dying 12 years earlier than him for no good reason. So, you know, we don't got long, folks. We can be nice about it, but we've got to be strong. So I want to congratulate you all. Well done. Good mahi. Don't worry about iwi politics. Me mahi at te mahi. We put you on there to get on with the job. Don't get hung up. Other people get hung up. All we want is forward momentum, eh? That's what we want, because our people need you today. Kōrero, koutou katoa. Tautu wara nā mihi katoa kia koutou. Me tū kaha tata. Kōrero, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud to move the receipt of these reports. And in doing so, I offer you my gratitude for your work that you've undertaken.
Kia ora, kia ora. Oh. Tēnā koe. Kua takoto te mōtini i rungi i te tēpu, koutou e whakamana me ai, koutou whakakao, whakakore rānei, kao, carried. Well, I have to say that me and Kerry are the interim shareholders for the IMPB at the moment. It is a company and the intention is at some time to transfer shareholdings over to more representation of our iwi. So at the moment, we are the shareholders for the company itself. But thank you, Nā, for those words. But is any other pātai from the floor? Comments? Ka pai. Oh, Alex.
Congratulations, Tihei Takitimu. It's fabulous to see where you've got to, and I've been following along in the periphery of your conversations. But the whole way along, it's absolutely vital that you're successful. Because as far as I can tell, anywhere in the
you, Alex.
Good boy. At the moment, a piece of work that we're undertaking, so phase one was to go out and talk to our whānau and gather insights around what their priorities and things were, which you saw the presentation. Phase two of that work that JMP Consulting's leading with us, and the sponsors of that project, myself and Henry, is to look at what does the next phase look like in terms of ongoing engagement and advisory back to the board. And we've already talked about how do we construct something that goes from porangahau to nuhaka, that people feel that their voice will be heard within the system. So that's a piece of work we're doing at the moment, Alex. As I said before, we've left our 2 spots open in terms of the directors that have left until we sort of work through what the operating model looks like with advisory. So we don't really have an answer for you yet, because it is a challenging and tricky one to do. I think that was the first. What was the second question? Oh, around locality pairs. So I think the original intent was to have the localities within, and I just, because I was part of the establishment, to have localities as Te Wairoa, Ahuriri, Here Taunga, Tamatea. And then Wairoa was a prototype locality where we could do our own plan, and I see Anna here, who's leading that for us into Wairoa. And then, of course, the new government came in, the minister said, stop, we're not going to do it. So one of the things that we want to do, we know is important as a part of the model, is ensuring that there are localised plans for those communities, not only the community of Tamatea, but Porangahau, Takapau, all those specific communities which are quite different. So we don't know what that looks like, but what we know is those plans have to be reflective of community need, and those communities have to be part of the decision making around what money's invested in what, but also the feedback around whether those services that are currently delivering are meeting your needs. So partly we sort of, as you know, we don't hold the money, so we don't get to make the final decisions and sign off at the moment on who gets the money. We're still working whether that's our role or not, but what is our role is to say, here are the needs of this community, and what are you doing about it? And you've said you've been going to do about this for the last, I don't know how many annual plans, and so holding them to account on that delivery. So I hope that answers a wee bit about your question. Yes, yeah, we're still on journey, Alex. Yep, we are.
Check. Just to add to that, I guess what we can do in regards to some of the whānau voice of Tamatea in Central Hawke's Bay is actually decipher the Tamatea voice and then extract that out and share that, because that'd be more specific to Tamatea as opposed to all of Kahungunu. And I think any other event or opportunity for us to gather more whānau voice is the opportunity for us to engage further with Tamatea. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a challenge extracting data by locations, getting down to that locality level, and that's one of the challenges for us moving forward. And we've put on the table with the Minister the most efficient, if you will, way to actually monitor services is to ensure that that data is reflective of those specific communities. So we're not talking about GP enrolments for Hawke's Bay, we're talking about what does that look like for Takapau, Porangahau, Waipukaro, those areas. So that's an ongoing discussion with Te Whatu Ora around that data.
My experience is that the deciphering from the high-level regional data is always a challenge. So it's something that I'm faced with on the amount of funding that comes from infrastructure or local unemployment rates, where the net rate for the region is really high, but actually when you look at it at a Central Hawke's Bay level, it's actually about half of what it is at a regional level that gets hidden.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sort of speaking from experience of that voice, and how to find the actual metrics, takes a bit of digging.
Thanks, Mayor Alex. I was surprised at the question, given you rang me about it a week ago. Look, I think your question's absolutely relevant, and however you want to slice and dice, the monitoring function ultimately, I would argue, when we take data out of the system and or whānau voice, has to be able to be interpreted and influenced, whether through advocacy, innovation funding or otherwise, for that community. Otherwise, we're actually part of the problem. because the system is unable to actually respond in that way. I think there's an inherent limitation sometimes about the quality of data that we might get out of the system. But for whānau voice, that's the voice of the very communities we're collecting from. Why would we not want to share that? And I think Heather partly demonstrated that today. But I think that has to be an assurance. One of the problems that I've got is making sure that we're really confident in what it is that we give to you. And I think that has been the time-consuming process. But for Tamatea, like it would be for all of those parts of our community that are moving in health, it absolutely has to be.
I'll just add to that, when Jodie and her team set out to collect the whānau voice, we were really clear that we weren't going to get everybody's voice because of the time frame to collect it. And I can't put my hand on my heart and say we will ever collect everybody's voice. So those that turn up to the AGM, you're here today, you might not come back to the next AGM, but it's collecting as many as we could at the time. And we had planned to get down to Waipak, but the time constraint to report back to the board didn't allow us to, but we had a slight bit of faith in the voice that we collected from the AGM and from Waitangi Day, which was huge. So yeah. So I think that's what we need to make clear is, as much as we talk about whānau voice, let's be clear that we won't have every whānau's voice in our stats and data. Kia ora.
Yeah, I think Darren, as our agitator, said to us today, the journey of gathering the data we want to make decisions takes time, as we know. So why don't we just get on and do the mihi with what we've got? And I think that's what we want to do. We've done a lot. We're going to be on a journey of trying to get the statistics we need to get down to mesh block levels or whatever level we need to. But in the end, we've probably got enough. We've got enough that we can just start saying to the system, well, how are we delivering it? Because when we went out and talked to our whānau, they go, well, it's the same as the last time you came out. So stop asking us and get on with it. The getting on with it is for us is how do we get the system to get on with it, as you know, Alex said.
Just one thing I'll say, and it'll be a challenge to this room, as it will be perhaps to the audience that was seeking data, is you might not like what you hear because they might be part of the problem. Not our whānau, but those who provide services. And that's going to be the critical issue. They might see IMPB as the next cash cow to continue the status quo of provisioning, and it ain't going to be.
Oh, yes, nice. Yep, my grandfather used to say, if there's kai on the table, keep it short, son. So, well, if that's all, I know the kai's ready, but I'd just like to say a couple of thank yous. First one is to our fantastic program. Sorry? Sorry. We're under the earring? Sorry. I'm going to thank Edu, our fantastic comms manager.
I'll be 1 minute. Kia ora tātou, ko Edu West tōku ingoa. I have the privilege of leading our small comms team in the operations side for the board, and we just wanted to say two quick things. One was thank you, a huge thank you to all the whānau that keep engaging with us, that have feedback in all of our surveys and our engagement activities. And we don't take it lightly that people trust us with their narrative and trust us with their issues that enable the board to see to those and those, advocate through the system for the change that we need. And then the other one was just, this is how you can connect with us. So that QR code links through to the e-version of the annual report, to the sign up for our e-pānui, which is a quarterly summary of the activity of the board, and then our social channels, which give a more day-to-day or week-to-week update on places where you can engage with the board, and also parts of those smaller surveys that we are going to be running going forward to keep engagements and whānau voice collections as easy as possible. Yes, that's all. Kia koe. E te rangata.
Should have turned up to the briefing, eh? But Look, I just want to say a couple of thank yous. I think the first one on behalf of the board, we'd like to thank our fantastic program manager, Gina Cole at the back. She's done a fantastic job.
Hey, Gina.
Along with our board sec, Jackie, who supports the board really well. Tihei, and of course, Eru, our comms manager that you've just had. And I have to say, our comms team are pretty young and it makes us feel quite older. I don't think we're that old, but we always comment saying thank you here. I think that came from you, that first comment, but just want to mihi to the back, the staff at the back that make things happen. I also want to thank Iri Hapete and the Health Hawke's Bay team and Te Whatu Ora. They've really come and lent in hard with us in terms of access to data and some of the support. So I just want to thank Health Hawke's Bay and Te Whatu Ora. I also want to thank Jody and the team at JMP Consulting for the mahi that they've been doing, as well as Mara at Te Kahui Tautoko for the fantastic work that they've done with the voice and the monitoring program as well. Right. And just last but not least, to the board, the colleagues, on behalf of myself and Kerry, it's been fantastic. You've been a great board to work with, and there's certainly a mountain of work in front of us in terms of the transition and some of the stuff that's still happening with Te Whatu Ora, the amount of reviews that are currently in place. There's a lot of reading we have to do and digesting in order to be prepared for the meeting. So just on behalf of the chairs, just want to thank our board members as well. So, o mai te paku paku. Ka pai. Awa, koena nā kōrero I tēnei ahi pō, me mihi anō kia koutou katoa I whakarau I ka mai tō tātou whare toi toi, I runga anō hoki o tēnei whenua o here taunga, I raru te pai maunga o kahurānake e mihi nei kia koutou katoa. Mai I a mau kai tātira ki ngā pai maunga o Ruahine, nei nā mihi nei kia koutou katoa mā koe whakakapi, tā tātou hui I te whakamoimiti, me te tuku whakamoimiti mō tā tātou kai, nā reira mi noi tātou. E te ariki kia haere mua mātou tō korori me tō kaha. Tā huri mai te whakaori a mātou kei whiu a mātou e ki ngā mate tai mahai nare me whakaori a mātou rungi au manakitanga. A hako kai ruke mātou I a koe tahuri mai whakaurangi a mātou nā te mea tēnei mātou te tūmonaka tūnei me tau whakawahingi a mātou. E te āriki toro mai o ringa mātou, o ringa atawhai kinunga kia mātou. A ngā whānau katoa e whakarau I ka mai tō mātou nei whare tēnei ahi pō, kia hoki pai rātou kia rātou kāinga kia rātou whānau I te mutunga o tēnei kaupapa. E te atua, e whakawhiatana hoki mātou kia koe mōna kai hora atu nei mo I a mātou nā kai hua o te mona, ngā hua o te whenua, ka tuku nei kia mātou hei oranga mo mātou tinana, whāngau hoki o mātou wairuki te toro o te ora. Korore ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmene. Āmene. Kia ora. Kia ora. Kia ora matua.